Right. The subject of Islam and environment really is one of the extremely important subjects that we often come across and debate in very large scale. To start with, I wanted to probably talk about the word environmental protection, the word protection itself, because Islam as it stands, it would be better to speak about giving welfare to the environment rather than protection, because for my understanding, protection would indicate conflict and aggressive tendency within this relationship. Although conservation might be helpful, but we need to look into those two concepts. And I think I would like to assume that the Islamic tendency towards conservation is a tendency of working with the environment rather than standing against the environment. I remember one day, just after Christmas, I went to Tesco's to do some shopping, and that was just immediately after a decision was taken by the Welsh Assembly with regard to the environment. And the lady in the shop asked me for 5p for each bag of my shopping, and I reacted in feel like unexpected way. I said, "This is not right," and I was a little bit upset. And she smiled and she said to me, "Well, this is the Welsh Assembly's decision." And then I thought about it, and I said, "Oh yes, that's true." And I put all my shopping truck and I took them to the car. The wind was blowing, and half of my shopping went away with the wind. And I said to myself, I am the victim of eco-extremism. Back home, I started thinking about it, and I came to the conclusion really that that is a valid point really, and I think we need to take consideration the concept of environmental extremism. And I can see I have disappeared from the screen. The concept of environmental or eco-extremism is a new concept which appeared in the environment. And I really want to not talk about itself as well as among a group of concepts. I don't want to go back and speak about why Islam conserved the environment and how Islam conserved the environment, and talk about all the verses in the Quran that emphasize the idea of creation and protection. I think these are concepts which have already been discussed and established within our Islamic theology and Islamic legal concept about the environment. I like to look into few ideas, maybe then we can grapple with them, and I leave it to you maybe to ask questions about it if that is at all the right way to do it. Islam looks at the welfare of the environment, just to stick to the word that I'm suggesting. Islam looks at the welfare of the environment. And by the way, the word the welfare of the environment is not coined by myself necessarily. There is himayat al-bi'a, which means protection of the environment. And there is ri'ayat al-bi'a, which means giving welfare to the environment. And there's a new tendency among Muslim scholars who are becoming interested in the environment in the last few years. People like Sheikh Yusuf al-Qardawi and Ali Jum'ah, the Sheikh of the Azhar. They wrote in that issue of the environment. And one of the concepts that Qardawi was suggesting is to look into the welfare rather than to look into the idea of protection. Because, as I said, welfare means looking after the environment, developing it, supporting it, not only protecting it against enemies, then it's rather to work with it and develop it and be part of it. And one of the important, I think, concepts which is important, and why I started talking about my trolley and shopping bags, Tesco's shopping bags, one of the important concepts is relevant to that. That is the balance between interests. Islam sees the social interest divided into three kinds. These which are recognized by Islam, which is called al-masalih al-mu'tabara, and these which are not recognized by Islam, which is called al-masalih al-malghiyya, which is abrogated or cancelled by Islam. And there is a third kind of interest, which is called al-masalih al-mursalah, which is the interest that has been left by Islam for the discretion of human being during their life. And this idea of balancing between interests can be a deciding factor for us today as Muslim environmentalists in balancing, engaging the need for conservation and welfare, if you like, and how much we should go into. Because we have two extremes with regard to how the environment should be looked after. One would go to the extreme left, if you like. I don't think you can see my hand. And the other one goes into the extreme right. The left one, the first one, really insists on that conservation has to be for nature, just because of itself, notwithstanding its benefits to human being. It's quite understandable, really. And the other one insists that the care for environment, protection of the environment, conservation of the environment can only be possible by considering the plausibility of this conservation. And there's a lot of groups standing on the right, on the left, many of them, and I would say most of them, to be honest about it, are not necessarily motivated by the interests of the environment itself. They are motivated by maybe other interests. Either they would represent ideological groups who would like to use the issue of the environment for their own agenda, or they would be people who are interested in the materialistic aspects, being like, for instance, businessmen or government decision makers, and so on and so forth, oil industries, millionaires. I can see now that there are some messages coming to me, and I didn't see them before. I must admit my ignorance about using this particular gadget before. Let me see what it says. Yes, we can hear you. I can hear you. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Walaikum salam. Okay. Walaikum salam. Everything is going fine. And those two groups really, one of the my main point with both of them is that actually they do not address the environment as it is. They do not put the welfare of the environment as to be protecting the environment in order to achieve their own interest. And quite often, religious groups also are involved in it. They use the environment as a kind of springboard in order to tell other people, look, our faith in the environment, try to protect it. Come and be Christians, whatever else, Buddhist, Jews, Muslims, or whatever. I think the conservation of the environment in Islam doesn't need that. What it is embedded part of the Islamic instruction. Right from the day one, you see that Muhammad ﷺ was actually emphasizing the idea of care for the environment. This is reflected in so many examples. And as I said again, I don't want to go into what I have said before in various articles and books. You can just read about that. But there is one example which I always like to cite it, which is the example of the Prophet ﷺ looking at the mountain of Uhud, a mountain in Mecca, and saying, Uhudun jabalun yuhibbuna wa nuhibbu. Uhud is a mountain that loves us and we love. Meaning he loves the mountain loves him. And that includes all the fauna and the flora and everything which is in that particular, if you like, environmental position. And we have the idea of balancing the interest, as I said before, whereby if the interest has ceased to exist, then we do not have to do it anymore. And that is where we stand, really. Like, for instance, if there are some endangered species, Islam certainly encourages protecting it. But if this endangered species is in the environment again, or in the same number, and Izzidien Abdul Salam, in his book, in many of his books, but his book قواعد الأحكام في مصالح الأنام, the basic of injunctions in the interests of people. And by the way, Izzidien Abdul Salam, who was a medieval Muslim writer, and he was also a great leader of an Islamic army. He wrote his book and presented us with a kind of scale in dealing between maslih, interest, and AFASID, which means the cause to the society. And there are in the opposition between the social interest and the مصالح إذا تعارضت فإن الأهم يجب رعايتها مع اشتراط تجنب الضرر مع رعاية الحذر. So if there is benefit and harm which is in the same level, be given a precedence, is the one which leads to the reduction of harm. Example to that, I think this is a little bit hilarious example, which always the ulama speaks about it in their yellow book. They say praying without clothes. How can a person pray without clothes? The action sounds quite abominable, unprohibited, but when we look at it on the scale of which is more important, prayer is more important than praying without clothes. So if somebody has no clothes, for one reason or another, this is a hypothetical example maybe, but don't forget that many of the Islamic countries can cause people to be without clothes, without enough clothes maybe. So the same thing applies on a huge amount of environmental dangers which has been pelleted on us by the culture of consumerism, which bleeds the elements of our earth and destroy it, rather than using it in a directed, controlled, managed, wise way. And example to that is the use of chemical pesticides in planting. I know many people started moving away from that, but another example really, and I think maybe some people might disagree with me about that, is the use of the nuclear reactors in generating electricities, and both these practices can lead to huge dangers to the society, and we need to find alternatives to them. The theory of Islam with regard to, and I have covered 18 minutes so far, the theory of Islam with regard to the presence of human being on earth can be summarized in how to organize this presence itself. There's a clear relationship between the Quranic terminology to give welfare to the elements of life and the method on which life is being exercised. And this is quite clear in the Quran, in verse Qasas 77, whereby the Quran say, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَابْتَغِي فِيمَا أَتَاكَ اللَّهُ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيا وَأَحْسِنْ كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ وَلَا تَبْغِ الْفَسَادَ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. And seek, the verse say, in what Allah has provided to you the hereafter. And don't forget your share of the world, and do ihsan, do justice, as Allah has given justice to you, and don't seek corruption in earth. Allah does not love those who are corrupters. And it's interesting that this verse really, like other verses, has been given or stated in the advice of the good people to Qarun, the richest man on earth at that time. And usually the Quran uses the same word when the speakers are people that Allah approves of them. So he used their words themselves, whereby when the Quran speaks about something that he doesn't approve, he quotes it in the third person singular. But this is only a lexical point. The point I'm trying to make is that the Quran is saying that when you do justice, try to balance between your life and what is for what you are doing for reformation of earth. The Islamic economic environmental, let me say it again, the Islamic environmental economics aims to create a balance between soul and body, spending and saving, and poverty and all of the economical cycle, as well as it aims to create balance between death and life. And the phenomenon of death and life in the experience of human being on earth is nothing but a test for the human behavior on this earth while he's living on this planet, which Allah has described as a camel. هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها. Allah made this earth like a dhalul. The word dhalul is one of the names of the camel, which is it's made subservient to you. But that subservience does not exclude it from its own rights and its duties. The camel, a human being has to feed it, and it will feed it back. And the quality also is another central point in Islamic from where Islamic environmental economics starts. And this is really it's difficult to say all these concepts that I've been thinking about and digesting, and I'm hoping to write a book on it as well, another book apart from the environmental dimensions of Islam. It's the idea of equality, I was saying. The quality of the elements of nature is not really only based on what we think is equality. The quality really is something which has to be according to the instruction that Allah has provided for us. And sometimes we think that this is the quality. The quality is by driving a limousine, by eating expensive food, by having holidays. But really this is not what it is. The quality of our life has to be balanced according to the input that we provide to the rest of the civilians of the earth. The earth is seen as we are nothing but one member of the society of the creatures that Allah has created on this earth. And there are so many verses really that can support what I'm saying. Obviously, I'm approaching the end of my half an hour. But there are, trust me, there are so many verses from the Quran and from the Hadith which are not actually interpreted verses. They are directly related verses which can confirm the actual meaning of the need for human beings to understand what is the meaning of equality. quality of the elements of life. And one of the examples is that is Surah Al-Ra'd, Thunder 17. And actually, the idea of quality of life vis-a-vis the impact that a human being can make on the environment is in many ways similar to what other environmentalists would call for, even the deep ecologists, which see that economics is nothing but a method, really. It is not an objective, because in our time, economics, and I've been talking a lot about economics, and I think we need really today to look into an Islamic environmental economics. There aren't many people who are actually researching on that, and I would like to see quite a few of our young brothers and sisters who are hopefully taking the lead from on dealing with these environmental matters, who look into constructing environmental economics, Islamic environmental economics. It is, as I said, it's based on a balance between spending and saving, and misuse and human responsibility vis-a-vis the rape of the environment. And we need also to remember that Islamic economics is not, Islamic environmental economics is not really any different than the rest of economics that we know, because it is based on the same principles in general, but there is one important difference, that it actually aims to fit within the norms and ideas that Islam has provided for a human being. Like, for instance, in the Quran, when it says in 2nd verse, Surah Al-Baqarah, it is He who has created you all what is in earth. It is He who has created for you all what is on earth. And many Muslim scholars think the word create for you, they think that this verse really indicates that a human being is the master of the environment. Whereby it's not really the truth, because lakum, the word itself, when you look at it, to you, the word you, doesn't say you human being. The verse says you creatures of Allah. Obviously he's speaking to the speaking creature. He's not speaking to everybody, but a human being, his responsibility, his amanah, is really by conveying the message of Allah and applying it towards other creatures. So when he say it is He who has created for you whatever on earth, and then He went to heavens and made it into 7 heavens, and He knows, and He is the all-knowing. وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٍ. The ulama, the hermeneutics scholars say it is nassun amun mutlaq. It's a text which is general, unspecified. Quite often people come to the text and try to give it meaning which might not necessarily meant to be relevant to that. And you find even top scholars like Ibn Qayyim, the great alim, the student of Ibn Taymiyyah, he himself spoke about these particular points, and he said really the word lakum does not necessarily mean only one group of people. He didn't have the environmental debate. He had some other kind of debate about who is you. And he said you does not mean one group of people. It is an absolute general verse which is relevant to many other things. And from that we can extend it to say that, well, the word you is not necessarily relevant to human being. Because if you look at this universe, this wide universe surrounding us, you will see from when you read the Quran, when you read the Hadith, and even when you read the texts of the Muslim scholars, you come to the conclusion that elements of the environment, and the textbook elements of the environment is air, water, human being, animal, and earth. These are the textbook elements of the environment. They are all really part of a corollary symphony, if you like, which is created by God, and praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, praise Him for His glory and His presence. So a human being, his responsibility does not make him the master of all of those. His presence on earth really is based on the fact that he will not continue if he does not care of it. And that comes very close to the Gaia theory, whereby the environment takes care of itself. Our presence, Islam has no problem about that. That our presence on this earth does not continue if we as a human being cause the destruction of the environment. And in fact, if we read the Quran, we find all the discussion on it about the end of the world sound like if it's a cataclysmic. Sorry, I don't know how to say it. It's a catastrophic way of ending. When the Quran says when the seas become boiling, when the seas become like fire, and when the mountains are blown asunder, all this indicates that there is going to be some kind of end to the earth. So who is going to cause this end? If we cause this end, then that proves that really earth takes care of itself. And when these are theories, of course, but from our point of view, we emphasize that if we don't care for the environment, we might end like whatever other people has ended to. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala favor those who do taqwa. Inna akramakum inda Allah atqakum. Allah does not favor those who do not do taqwa. And the best taqwa is to care for other elements of human citizens. To care for the rest of the earth and the citizens of earth is one of the ultimate objectives of Islam, which is based on taqwa. I'll stop here and I see whether you have any questions. Maybe you can, I can see that there are few ladies and gentlemen there. And I'll continue if you like me to. Just let me know, Brother Muhammad, if you want, or you want to receive answers. Any response, please do. Thank you very much. Yes, Alhamdulillah. I was under the impression when I started my first webinar in my life that you would be asking me questions live as well. But now I think I know the idea. I know how it works, and I think you will ask me questions. جزاكم الله خير. حجر. بارك الله فيكم. Is it Hajar? Yes, Hajar or Hajar. Hajar. Please ask if you have questions, or there is some more I can add to the discussion. Right, a question here. I was hoping that you could give me some idea of what you have done on this field of Islam and environment. Well, I mean, I really have been doing that. I have been working. I started researching the environment. I'll tell you a secret. And I think I brought that secret to me here. I brought some books here with me. Back in 1983. I started with a group of scholars producing what I think is one of the earliest 83 when I was a junior lecturer in King Abdulaziz University. And really that was, to me, it was an eye-opener, because there was Professor Wolfgang Warheni, the General Secretary of UCU at that time, IUCN, which is the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. He came to our university, King Abdulaziz, and asked us to write something about the environment. Everybody didn't know what is the issue. And since then, really, I took the conservation of environment as one of my key research points. And I produced few books and articles. And there's another one which is written by Ethics of Environment and Development. It was edited by Angel and Angel. Probably many of you know it. And I produced quite a lot of articles on different journals and papers. And probably, as Muhammad mentioned, that my book is the environmental dimensions of Islam. It is on the internet, and it's in Google. There's a lot of things, really. I mean, I attended interfaith conferences, and I contributed to lots of papers. But I must say, for my life, I have been only a theorist, if you like, and sometimes campaigning for the environment. But I think we as Muslims need to continue that area of research, really, that area of action, because this reflects the best side of Islam to the modern world, a world which hears only about the negative aspect of Islam. And when we talk to people and tell them that the conservation for the environment, the care for the environment, the welfare of the environment is embedded into Islam, we need to know how, and we need to read more about it. And I hope that when we think about it, we can progress a little bit more, and not just think about it just as a method of inviting people to Islam. If that comes as a byproduct, that's fair enough. But I think we need to think about conservation and looking after the environment as an Islamic duty to us, really. That's how I see it myself. And in every time and in every era of history, there are certain duties which become more prominent. And I think in our time, there is this particular area among some other areas which we need to think about. I think I'm told that we should really, I should listen to you, and you should ask your questions if you like. Usually at the university, if my students do not ask me questions, I ask them. Unfortunately, you are hiding behind the webinar. The webinar protects you from me, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot ask you questions that you can answer. I think one of the points that often comes in discussions is why there is lack of writings among Muslim contemporary scholars with regard to the environment. I think there are lots of writings, and like for instance, there are writings like Sayyid Hussein Nasr. Sayyid Hussein Nasr claims that he's one of the earliest writers who wrote on the environment, but he looked at it from an angle which, for all it's worth, can be controversial among the mainstream Islamic research. But still, it's an important view, and it is helpful to find some kind of ecumenical view among all Muslim scholars. I just finished writing an article which is called Towards an Ecumenical View of the Environment, whereby I looked at the view of Muslim scholars who are, if you like, quite traditional, like Ibn Uthaymeen, and on one side, and I looked at the view of Muslim writers on the other spectrum of research, like Sayyid Hussein Nasr, and tried to find some kind of corollary relationship between them, passing through Ali Jum'a and passing through Yusuf al-Qaradawi, passing through myself, because I have contributed something as well on that, and try to come with the general concepts that are important. There's a question here about, on the European context, how do you think mosques and Islamic centers could be involved in a campaign on Islam and environment? And what is their role on this issue? I remember telling us, or me, that you were involved in the building of a mosque in Wales, and we're looking in incorporating eco-friendly behaviors in the building of the mosque. Absolutely right. I mean, this morning I was in a meeting of the people who are building the mosque, and I insisted really. I mean, we went to meet. I'm glad, Brother Muhammad, you mentioned that. When during the meeting, I spoke to the architect and said, "Look, we need this mosque to be environmentally friendly mosque. Can we do that? How do we do that?" And he looked at me and he said, "Look, Izzidien, you gave me a budget of so and so. If you want it to be environmentally friendly, then you have to give me 3 times the amount of budget for that." And I was really shocked. And in fact, I was almost, disappointed, because I mean, okay, we have a budget of £150,000. It's not a secret. And he wanted me to give him about £450,000 in order to make the building environmentally friendly. I said to him, "Can you not make it less than that?" He said, at least at the simplest cost, it will be twice as much as what we are doing. So really, this is another problem that we need to think about, how to cost an environmentally friendly structure or building. My wife is an architect, and she wrote her MPhil on Islamic environmental architecture. And this is one of the problems, really, that architecture quite often like to be environmentally friendly, but it costs a lot. And this is why, when it comes, the relationship between economics and environmentalism, we need to balance the economics in order to protect the environment. All environmental catastrophes started with economic catastrophes, and quite often, like the cost of building is very expensive. Materials very expensive, and in order to do in the mosque, if you want to put solar, I was suggesting solar slates, and they said this will go through the roof, and even solar panels will cost a lot and produce very little, they said. So really the problem is that they are evaluating the environment by economics. And this is what is the problem. The problem is with the economical system. But of course, within the behavior of Muslims within the mosque, of how to make the mosque environmentally friendly, you can do that. You can reduce the amount of water that you waste. You can reduce the furniture that you put in the mosque. In fact, the mosque can be one of the best environmentally friendly examples, because basically the mosque has no furniture. And I think that is one of the important aspects of being environmentally friendly. Of course, there are so many other examples. I'm sorry, I have to bend my screen so I can read your writing. Could you please elaborate on more Nasser's view? Well, Nasser's view really... Oh, sorry. Nasser's view was actually more or less... I mean, I cannot really elaborate in great details on it, but he comes very close with his mystical view from the Buddhist view, and that can create some problem among Muslim scholars, not necessarily Buddhist, but the concept of the soul, the dissemination of the soul, where the relationship between human being and God. All these things really cannot be accepted by traditional Muslims. And you can read what he wrote in the internet. There's a lot of writings. What would you suggest us in order to be successful in this da'wah? I think really it is important really to be yourself. And I think we, as Muslims who are living in the West, I don't think we should see ourselves as people living in the diaspora. I think this is one of the miscalculation and misunderstanding. Muslims in the West are part of the West. if you are British, you have to be British and Muslim and be proud of both of them. And try to work your way in such a way whereby you can actually provide for the society, and caring for the nature and environment is part of such a providing. I think sometimes it becomes very difficult. I mean, if we go towards the general discussion about how do we be successful, I think there's a lot of ways of doing it. But I think the environment, to my reading, to my view, is one of the best way of approaching the society. Especially approaching other religions, because other religions might disagree about so many ideas. They might disagree about the nature of God, about prophethood, about so many ideas. But certainly, almost all of them agree on that they need to take care of the environment. I remember I attended a conference called Interfaith Climate Summit in Uppsala, Sweden. 2002. It was 28 to 29 November. I think if you write in the internet, Interfaith Climate Summit, Uppsala, Sweden, you'll find I gave a series of lectures there, and I have the recording of that conference. I have it here with me, and it shows you how important. My picture is not with the people on the cover, because when the picture was taken, I was not there. But I think it is helpful to try to see the environment as a kind of interacting with other human beings, because there are so many human beings who really care for environment as much as we do for it. And there is a platform for meeting people. And don't forget that the Quran said, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. And we made you into nations and tribe to know one another. The best among you is the best in taqwa. And ta'arafu here, the word itself, I'm a scholar of Islamic fiqh and usul fiqh, and my background is based on deeply on Arabic language and Arabic syntax and hermeneutics. So when I read the verse, really, I see quite a lot of layers of meanings in it. When he says لِتَعَارَفُوا, it means to know one another. But the word عرف, it means custom. And the word عرف means good. So all these meanings are really packed into لِتَعَارَفُوا, which means that you know one another, you treat one another with justice, you treat one another with ihsan, and remember that the best among you is those who are practice taqwa. And what is taqwa? The Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked what is taqwa, he pointed up to his heart and he said, taqwa huna. The God-fearing is here, and pointed to his heart, meaning that it is an ethical concept. It is not really only a religiously revealed concept. It is a concept which human beings practice it in an ethical way towards all members of the society. And the idea of taqwa and akhlaq, ethics, is this fundamental element of Islam. It's easy to talk about it, really. But when it comes to their practice, it seems that many religious people forget the ethical aspect, and their actual reality comes out. And that is why I said politicians and quite often religious activists, they call for their mission, but when they have the power, whether being a leader or being a president or whatever, they forget about actually what is the ethical aspect of their faith. And the most important ethical aspect of their faith is really caring for others, and the environment is one of them. I mean, look, for instance, I don't know whether I'll be in trouble in that saying that, but Bush was elected, the senior Bush was elected as an environmental president. But when he became president, He told everybody that he's going to be the environmental president. But when he became president, and somebody asked him, "What are you doing? Why don't you serve the world environment?" He said to them, "I am the president of the United States. I'm not the president of the world." The environment is something which we all share. And I think it is important to be ourselves. I mean, I started talking about all of that because one of the questions came, how do we be successful in our action? I don't know whether I have went beyond my limit. Brother Muhammad, tell me when to stop, because I'm happy to talk more to you about it. Because I think one of the important aspects really that we need to remember when we talk about Islam and environment, you know, there are a few other problems with regard to the environment, the earth needing a system of life in order for the environment to flourish. At the moment, the system of life which we are living within is proving its unsuccess. And you see all this economical, because this current system is a system which is based on economics. And economics is based on thin air concepts. We had a conference about a year ago in the Faraday Institute in Cambridge. And that conference was, I think if you write in Google, you will find it. A few Muslim scholars were there. There were Hafiya Halim, there were Brother Fazlun Khalid, and there were quite a few other interfaith discussion. And that by itself, one of the most important concepts that came emphasized there is that really, in order to conserve the environment and protect it, we need to think about how do we change the system on which we are living, under which we are being controlled. Not necessarily making cluster movements. I do not believe really in any form of violence. I think the best way to achieve success is through the method of peaceful and rational thinking and campaigning for the environment. Look what Gandhi achieved and what other people could not. And at the moment, I mean, history tells us that violence is not achieving anything in modern time. It will lead exactly to the opposite. And I can and mark my word, if 9/11 and 7/7 didn't take place, I think the Muslim Ummah would have been much, much better. But there you are. This is unfortunate, and that is why we are suffering. We shall have another 10 to 15 minutes. Very good. Thank you very much, Brother Muhammad. Then that will give me some more time to speak about some other ideas. One of the environmental scholars a while ago spoke about the age of Earth, and some of you have already heard that. But I want to link that with how Islam. What is the Islamic position for it? First of all, if we imagine that the Earth is a creature or a human being which is 46 years old, considering the age of Earth, take from it a few zeros, and just from the age of Earth, think of it as 46 years old creature. First of all, we don't know except very little about the last 30 years of the age of this creature. We only know that the Earth was 42 years old before the rudimentary plants started living on it. and mammals and birds only appeared on Earth 8 months ago. In the beginning of last week, human being appeared. So on the age of 46 years, human being appeared on Earth only last week. At the end of the week, Earth was suffocated by an ice age. Human being only appeared in the last 4 hours of the age of Earth. This human being, during the last hour only, he learned how to plant, how to find his own houses, and he learned by the skills that Allah, his creature, has given him, huge skills. But in the last 1 minute, the Industrial Revolution took place. And during the last seconds of the age of Earth, human being, in an organized way, was able to destroy Earth beyond recognition. And this really can be seen in the Quran, which says in Surah Al-Nas, Surah Al-Rum 41, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. Corruption appeared on earth and on sea due to the action of a human being. So really, we have to think about where do we stand with regard to this earth. I mean, I said that Islam comes very close with regard to earth taking care of itself. Not necessarily exactly as what Professor Lovelock said in his Gaia theory. But there is nothing in Islam which say that if a human being destroys his earth, then the earth is going to be destroyed. Allah created this earth for a human being to care for it and to be responsible trustees on it. But a human being has managed to increase the number of his population and destroy the earth beyond recognition, although he was told to treat it with care and respect. We need really to think, when we talk about environment, in a more, if you like, modern way, and see how much that would tally with the Islamic principles. And to be honest about it, I have been researching this subject for a very long time. And I honestly do not regret 1 second that I have done that. Because I discovered that all what the modern ecologists talk about is really, it does exist within the Islamic instruction. And you can find that probably how the Prophet ﷺ himself treated the environment, treated his surrounding, treated his nature. I mean, it can't be more than talking to a date palm tree. You know, people, if you see me standing in the middle of the street, my garden, talking to one of my trees, you would think I am losing my mind. But the truth of the matter, really, the Prophet ﷺ recognized that these elements of the environment have an important aspect that deserve respect for themselves, not because of their worth to human being. And when he was seeing a date palm trunk, which has been taken here, it has been cut and made into a pulpit to stand and give khutbah on it. He said, this trunk, he came to it and hug it, and he said he was actually talking to me. And when we look at the Quran and hear that the Quran say that to Allah, all communities on earth are communities like you, human being. And notice this, created for you, and communities like you, those two verses. Those two verses really are two verses which I see them with a kind of interactive dialectical having interactive dialectical interplay in understanding, whereby one verse explains the other. And all those communities which praise Allah are communities like you, human being. And therefore, all what has created, Allah has created, He created for you the community of creatures. And they praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like you. But you, human being, do not understand how they praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that really put them in par with the human being. And the duty of human being is to be responsibly entrusted with his amana for them. The idea of amana comes here with regard to how human being should give welfare to the environment. It's an amana in the sense that a human being loses it if he does not live up to it. In other words, and that applies to everything in life, including, and particularly, I would say, economics. Many people think that the money in their pockets, and I think some of you are putting their hands in their pockets to see whether they still have the money in their pockets or not. Many people should feel their pockets and see that the pounds and coins which are in their pockets are amana to them. And they need to think about how to spend this amana. It is not it's true it is there to use, but there has to be a responsible trusteeship. And trusteeship is never in the Quran or in Islam seen without the idea of responsibility. If the human being stops to be responsible, then his responsibility stops. And that can be applied to so many things. When we talk about e-labeling, when we talk about how Islam... Now today we can combat the environment by looking at how do we evaluate every element of consumption in the right way. We do not say that this cup of tea worth... Today I bought this cup of tea, honestly I bought this cup of tea this morning for £1. But when I look at it, really it's worth much more than that. How much effort has been put into it, how much wastage has been put on it. There is an environmental value which is much more than that. And that is why if it breaks, then it has no value. We have to treat the elements of the environment with respect. And when we reach that point, then we'll be very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think I came exactly to, according to my computer, to the hour. If you have more questions, or if you want me to stop, please let me know. Or if you want to have any comments. There are a few ideas really that I actually didn't discuss them because I thought there's no need to them. You can get a lot of ideas from the internet. And there's a nice, useful book also, Islamic Ecology, which is written by Richard Fools and others. It's quite useful because he collected a lot of ideas and a lot of Muslim writers, and he tried to present it in many ways, in a useful way. It's written in, and I think it's a useful textbook for anybody who has interest in the environment. It's written in 2003 at Harvard College, and he claims that I am one of the earliest writers on the environment, and there is quite a good collection of environmental writings on that. Well, it has been very helpful, and thank you very much for having me. And I hope in the future that, if you want me, I'm quite happy to be with you. And I hope to produce something in the future together if we can. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al mursaleen.